All right, what's up, my friends? Welcome to a special pre-show episode of Bronze to Mythic. It's a new thing I'm doing, and I want to hear your feedback on it in the comments, of course, and in chat. I'm going to be going over all 10 of the draft archetypes in Wilds of Eldraine as we look forward to Bronze to Mythic starting tomorrow. So I obviously haven't drafted yet. I'm going to be going over the cards I think are important, kind of what each archetype wants to do, framed around the center piece being their signpost uncommons. For those who don't know, in draft, basically every set has a gold card. It's a color pair card for each color pair at uncommon. That's the card that kind of says like this is what this color cares about in draft. They call it signpost uncommon. A great way to kind of look at it and be like, oh, okay, blue white wants me to do this thing. So we're going to be basing this all off of those and just kind of going through 7 cards of each color pair, discussing what is going to work and what's not going to work, and what archetypes need to be kind of focused, which can be a little looser, and so on and so forth. And kind of get a little preview in for Bronze Mythic, which will be starting tomorrow night. That's right, tomorrow night, Bronze Mythic. Boom. There it is. That's right, we're going to get a night stream. I'm going to do 1 or 2 drafts tomorrow night as we get ready to Bronze Mythic, get ready for Worlds, and so on and so forth. It should be a lot of fun on YouTube always as well for all you YouTube folks. And again, I want to hear your thoughts on this. It's a new thing I'm trying out here, so let's do it. We're going to start with Boros. Starting out with Ash Ketchum, Party Catcher. Gotta catch them all. Party Crasher. This is a Boros 2-drop with haste, and Celebration is the major mechanic of the Boros draft archetype. Celebration is a mechanic where it's basically just turns on if 2 or more non-land permanents have ETB'd under your control this turn. So in the case of Ash, every combat, you put a +1/+1 counter on, which is obviously very, very good. So attacks for 2, then for 3, then for 4. That's a very, very solid 2-drop. And it also clearly kind of signifies this Boros color pair as a very aggressive color too. So the Celebration deck seems very, very aggressive, and very, very focused on putting multiple things in play. We can see another payoff here in Belligerent of the Ball. 3 for 3, which is fine. And then Celebration here is +1/+1 menace in combat, which is a good way to push through. And we got to say, so how are we going to do this, right? So normally you would think in a vacuum, oh, I got to play 2 things in a turn. That's tough to do. There are a ton of cards in this set that make 2 permanents for 1 card. Like an actual just ton. Hopeful Vigil is going to be one of the most important commons in the set, I think, in that it's a enabler for literally every deck. 2 mana for an enchantment, ETB, make a knight. So this is a 2-drop. This triggers your Celebration effects, right? Also an enchantment to sacrifice. Also a thing to bargain. Also a thing to, yada, yada, yada. A million different things this card can do. And again, this is a 2-drop and turn Celebration. We've got powerful 2-drops in both colors in Armory Mice, which is going to be basically a 3/3 attacker when you have Celebration, and Grand Ball Guest, which is also going to be a 3/3 attacker with Trample when you have Celebration. So, got to get in the board early, got to hit hard. We see a really cool one here, one to watch out for in Rat Catcher Trainee, which is obviously a fine 2-drop, but this has the Pest Problem Adventure, which is going to make 2 1/1 tokens at instant speed. This is going to turn on your adventure cards. Your Celebration cards in mid-combat. So, all of a sudden, Grand Ball Guest is a 3/3. All of a sudden, Armory Mice is a 3/3. So look for ways to turn on your Celebration at instant speed, which is important, as well as having enablers in general. And then also, we're going to look at, for most of the color pairs, a Mystical Archive card that fits well in the archetype. These are going to be a huge deal in draft. All right, so if you remember Brothers War draft, Strixhaven draft, the uncommon archive cards are going to show up a lot. For example, in Brothers War, Chromatic Star, Acre Wellspring, Mishra's Bauble. These cards were really, really important. You saw them a lot, and you could build around them as well. And some archetypes are, gain more than others, but they're really, really cool cards to have, and they're definitely a part of the main set. It'd be easy to look at the main set. For example, the Rat deck, which we'll get to, looks pretty good on paper as far as the cards in the set, but there are like 5 or 6 awesome Enchanting Tales cards for it that you wouldn't see initially without seeing the set. So Dragon Mantle here, cheap cantrip, permanent. Makes Celebration easier, little pump, pretty cool. Good with the bargain effects also. But that's your Boros colors for Celebration. The Golgari signpost card is Greta, Sweet Tooth Scourge, which is a 3 mana 3/3. ETB, make a food. Pay green, sack a food, put a counter on something. Pay 2 mana, sack a food, draw a card with life. So the green archetype is a little looser. You can see Celebration is going to be a very, very tight, aggressive deck. The green-black archetype, a little more about putting tokens in play, specifically food tokens. But these tokens can be used for, obviously, effects like this, where you are using the token to, gain effect that says sack of food. Also, bargain. Bargain is kind of the grand unifier in this set when it comes to the archetypes, where, if you're food, sack an artifact for bargain. If you're rats, sacrifice a rat token for a bargain. If you're the enchantment deck, sacrifice an enchantment for a bargain. So kind of playable in almost all the archetypes. We see Agatha's Champion here though. Very, very good 4/4. ETB fight something very, very powerful. So we use your food tokens for that. We have Tough Cookie, which is really, really good card in general. It's 2/2 makes a food. Makes your foods into 4/4s. So the deeper you are, the more food you actually want, because cards like Tough Cookie care about actual food, as does, of course, Greta. But we're looking for material here as well. A lot of cards in a set make multiple pieces of material, and these decks will be able to play off that. So Feed the Cauldron, instant removal spell, makes a food. This is going to be, fine in some decks as like an okay removal spell, but it's going to be really good in the food decks or in decks that care about the permanence as both extra value. It's important to watch your valuations here. Not every card is binary. It's not a card I want or a card I don't. Cards have a gradient of like how much you want them, and you're going to want a card like this more Golgari in the food deck. Also, Hamlet Glutton, a card you'll want in a lot of different decks, but should be very, very good here as far as sacking a food. This card's going to be a house. 5 mana for a 6/6, gain 3 life, second enchantment or an artifact or whatever else. And I'm a big Honey Mammoth fan. This card's even better. So the card's really, really good. Very, very exciting. I think that the green-black archetype will skew slower and more grindy, making a card like this very, very important to stabilize in the mid-game. So kind of the polar opposite of the Boros color pair, where green-black wants to play a nice, long, grindy game with a lot of game objects in play. There's some cool sagas that do this as well, which is Vanity can kill a small creature, make a food, make a roll. This thing is a permanent that makes 2 more permanents, which also counts for celebration. We have Welcome to Sweet Tooth as well, same idea, 10 for enchantment, makes a 1/1, makes a food, pumps things up. So a lot of permanents, a lot of game objects, a lot of things sacrifice, and that is Golgari in a nutshell. Moving on to Is It, pretty standard stuff here, right? The usual spells, matter, mechanic, and Is It. It's kind of always the mechanic really, but the Signpost card here is Johan, Apprentice Sorcerer, which is a 4 mana 2/5. So big booty there.
Oh my
and
God.
Johan says you may look at the top card of your library anytime, and then once a turn, cast an instant or sorcery spell at the top of your library. This card's really, really good. So, unlike Celebration, where it's just like, do these specific things to turn on your things, Johan just says, play a lot of instant sorceries. It doesn't need to be that complicated. A little bit looser of a theme, because if you're just playing spells that are good, you're playing spells that are good anyway, right? But cards like Sleight of Hand and Cantrips will be a lot better in this deck. And you can see here, Splashy Spellcaster. This is a card that's going to basically, Magecraft, trigger off an instant or sorcery, make a Sorcerer's Roll token. And it's funny because the bargain kind of cards, which involve sacrificing permanents, you would think wouldn't be good in the spells deck because it's not going to have that many permanents, but there are cards like this to make roll tokens, which is kind of cool. So you get your enchantment rolls, sacrifice those. Quick Study, it can be a lot better in the blue-red deck than most other decks as far as, card draw spell at instant speed. Frantic Firebolt, same idea. This card will be okay in most decks, but it'll be extra good in the blue-red deck. So once again, that sliding scale of quality. We got Unruly Catapult, which would be a linchpin card for blue-red. This is the kind of card where it's going to be pretty bad in your deck if you're not playing a lot of spells. But if you are playing a ton of spells, it's going to be a phenomenal card. Great blocker, constant damage source, should be really, really good. The Catapult, also a card like Into the Fey Court. Your blue-white, tappy deck, or like your, blue-black fairy deck might not want this card. But if you're a slower, more grindy spell-based deck, this card makes a lot more sense. So again, more of an archetype card in that regard. And then the archetype I'm looking out for here is Hatching Plans, because there is some bargain stuff in those colors. And this is a really, really cool old reprint. Used to be a rare. And this reprint and cards like it are the reason I absolutely adore these bonus sheets in draft. They're such weird cards that are so synergistic in such interesting ways. And this card should be really, really cool. A lot of different decks here. 2 mana to draw 3 cards and get a benefit's awesome. So you got to be able to use it. But if you can, really, really cool one. So, moving on to fairies. We've got Obraya, Dreaming Duelist, 2 mana for a 2/2 flash flying. Whenever you play a fairy, whenever fairy ETBs that your opponent loses 1 life, it's a good card, obviously. It's just like for, just 2/2 fly over 2 with flash, which is great. The fairy archetype, though, is a little bit lighter. This is more of a thin archetype where you don't need to be all fairies. There's not really many payoffs for like having a bajillion fairies in your deck. And there's some crossover here, too. You see Picklock Prankster here will be good in your blue-red deck, because Free the Fae can find an instant sorcery or fairy. Also good in your fairy deck. It's also a 1/3 flyer, which is pretty good. Just a good card in general, honestly. Barrow Naughty, really, really good card. I think starts very, very underrated. 1/3 flying lifelink for 2 seems fine until you realize there's so many rolls in it to make it a 2/4 flying lifelink, which is insanely good. So good card there. Dream Spoiler is a really cool card. A lot of instants happening in the fairy deck. But really, the fairy deck is like, it's kind of just like good spells and a couple of fairies. There aren't a lot of like cards that are like, if you have 10 fairies, you play win the game, or whatever kind of stuff. So Again, more of a looser archetype, more based around just kind of good cards. Fairy Fencing would be a fine removal spell without the Fairy Claws. Great with it, obviously. Spell Stutter, same idea. So these cards are just like spells that get better when you're playing fairies. You don't need to have, 25 fairies in order to be good, so that's why I think about Night Piercers here also. This is kind of just going to be a good stuff deck. You're playing good removal spells, play some flyers, kill some things, get value off your spells, and go from there. Kind of cool. So, next archetype is the Orzhov archetype, which is based around enchantments dying. So a lot of bargaining happening here. Neva, Stalked by Nightmares, 4 mana for a 2/2 menace. Gravedigger for enchantments or creatures. So, fine, honestly. Gravedigger is fine, but not what it used to be, 15 years ago or whatever. Also has the ability, whenever an enchantment you control is put into a graveyard of the battlefield, put a counter on it and scry 1. So Neva wants us to be in play in a longer game, watching you bargain things over and over and over again. And Black-White is definitely the colors that are all about sacrificing enchantments for value. We see Knight of Doves here, 1/3, whenever enchantment dies, make a bird. There's a lot of things in Black-White they care about. Whenever enchantment dies, do this. Drain 1, do this, do that. So definitely a kind of a grindier archetype. A card like this wants to be in play for a long time. So, pretty clearly signifies Black-White being a more controlling archetype, which is very, very important to be aware of when you're drafting it. Candy Grapples, obviously a good card by itself, but extra good here as are most bargain cards. Hopeless Nightmare kind of joins the 2-mana Sigil of Valor, whatever card. That's not, is it? I don't know. As far as an enchantment that does something else on good rate, and you can sacrifice it later too. So 1 black, lose 2, discard a card. Now you're even on cards in parity. And later on, sacrifice it for value, get a scry on. This card's going to play a lot better than it looks. This card would look weird in the normal set, but it'd be really, really good here at the focus on sacrificing enchantments. Princess Takes Flight is another one here where you might look at this and be like, oh, all right, so you temporarily get their creature, get a little buff, and then get it back. No, hold on. If you can sacrifice this enchantment before Chapter 3, the creature's gone forever. So this is a huge archetype card where in the bargain deck, this card's excellent. Not, without the bargain cards, it's not so good. So more of an archetype card you can get late, which is kind of cool. Cooped Up, kind of similar here, where you have a cool trick you can do with this where it's pacifism, but say they have a good utility creature in play, and the ability is killing you, right? So you can pay 3 to exile it, but you can also pay 3 to exile it, and then in response to that, sacrifice the enchantment to some other bargain effect, and the creature will still get exiled too. So a little extra value there, kind of a cool trick, and that's kind of nice as well. And we see Prophetic Prism here, also a reprint. Going to be good in your splash decks. Going to be good in almost all decks as a generic bargain enabler, which is kind of cool. Turns on splashes too, and that's kind of a cool one as well. So, Rats! Moving on to Rider Piper here. Swarm Piper, the Rakdos theme is rat tokens. The rat tokens are 1/1s that cannot block. So, very interesting, kind of like the mites, where they're not very defensive, but they can be offensive. And if you're ratting, you need to find a way to make these rats matter in some way. So sack them to bargain. Find ways to pump them. Of course, the Piper here can give them Death Touch, which is pretty cool also. But we've got Twisted Sewer Witch, big payoff, 5 mana for a 3/4. Whenever it ETBs, makes a rat, and then all your rats get buffed with the roll, with Wicked rolls, which is excellent. So it makes them all actually threatening and need to be blocked. We got Lord Skitter's Butcher, Ratatouille here. 3 mana for a 2/3. EDB can make a rat, that creature draw a card, give things menace. So finding a way to push these rats through or use them to be very, very important. This is a deeper archetype. So this is a more of a tight archetype where you want all your cards to kind of do something you want them to do, because there's kind of a critical mass here and kind of you're playing a lot of kind of weirder cards that all work together. So kind of a more than some other parts kind of deck. Sugar Rush would be a card that should be very, very good in this deck because it's kind of a weird card, right? It's not a pump spell. It's only +3/+0. So if you just use this to trade up, it's not that good. But if I have 4 rats in play and you have a 4/4, and I attack with this, you can't really afford to block, because it's a pretty bad trade for you. I draw a card, trade a rat, pretty awesome. So this card will be specifically very, very good in the rat deck, which is cool. Rowan's Grim Search, this card will be good in a lot of different decks, obviously. Probably one of the better black commons. Will be also good in the rat deck as well as far as finding bargain fodder. And then we have a lot of really, really good Mystical Archive cards for the rat deck. There are a ton. At uncommon, there's Raid Bombardment, makes all your things deal extra damage. We've got Vampiric Rites, sack a rat, gain a life, draw a card. There's Shared Animosity. There's a whole bunch of really good ones, more so than any other archetype by a lot. So the rat deck gains the most from the Enchanting Tales sheet, which is really, really cool. I think you might not have picked up on initially if you looked at the set list, but it's going to be very, very important in draft, especially the uncommons. Selesnya. Sir Armont the Redeemer, 5 mana for a 4/4. When ETBs make a monster roll token,
It's a monster! Kill it!
put it on another creature you control, not this. This pumps all of your enchanted creatures. So green white is all about having creatures with rolls on them or with auras on them. So kind of like aura stuff. Again, a little more of a looser theme, where you're just kind of like augmenting your creatures using rolls. And then having enchantments, if they live or they die, so on and so forth. Red Tooth Vanguard, phenomenal 2-drop here, up to 3/1, trample. Whenever an enchantment ETBs, you can pay 2 return from your graveyard to your hand. So if you're playing on auras, it's obviously great. We got Tanglespan Lookout. Whenever an aura ETBs, draw a card. This is going to be a huge one, as far as having all your rolls. This thing draws you 2 cards in the course of the game. It's excellent. And it could do more than that as well. We got the roll cards here. All these roll cards are going to be pretty good in general. They're celebration enablers. They're bargain enablers, but of course in the green-white deck specifically, having the aura matters too. So Genealogist here is 2/3, makes a royal roll, put on a different creature, it's important to note. We got Besotted Knight, same idea. Adventure, put a roll somewhere and make a body, which is cool. Cursed Courtier might look like a card for the black-white deck, because you want to sacrifice a roll for value. With bargain, you want to free this thing from being a 1/1 to being a 3/3. But don't forget, you can only have one roll on each creature. So if you play a new roll on a creature, the old one goes away. So if you put like a monster roll on this, now you have a 4/4 lifelink trample, which is excellent. So this plays well in the aura deck as well as the bargain deck, which is kind of cool. And then we got a really good one here from the sheet in Knightly Valor. This is an excellent card. Going to be great in the aura decks. Going to be awesome in the celebration decks. Also has 2 permanents, which is cool. This one ETBs, pumps a creature, makes a 2/2. This card was very, very good in draft, the format that it was in, so it's going to be very good here also, both on rate and on synergy. So that is your green-white archetype. The blue-white archetype is all about getting frosty, let it go and so on and so forth, where it's all about tapping things. More of a tight archetype, right? So this cares about whenever you tap things, you get a benefit. So the Numbing Depths here, 2/3. Whenever it ETBs, tap a creature and stun it. Whenever you tap one or more untapped creatures your opponents control, you draw a card, but only once a turn. So really, really powerful, obviously, because this is an engine you put it into play. And then you have effects that are tapping things. You're just drawing cards over and over again. That's really good, because tapping things is pretty good anyway. You're just tapping down blockers, yada, yada, yada. Solitary Sanctuary, another build around here. The mana for an enchantment, ETB, tap and stun. If you tap a creature your opponent controls, put a counter on one of your creatures. So we can see this kind of like flow of like, okay, play things, tap things, get benefits. Frostbridge Guard, same idea of a sliding scale. If this card's like going to be okay, and you're like, blue, your red, white, kind of beat down deck, but not great. But the tappy deck, you're getting value off this kind of expensive tap by getting other things too. Succumb to the Cold, same idea. Kind of your blinding beam effect. Tap 2 things, stun them, which would already be good enough anyway. And then you get the value from tapping things, which is awesome too. Snare Master Sprite, kind of a cool crossover card with the fairies. But this thing ETBs, you get to tap something and stun it. Normally this would be a 2/2, but because tapping matters more in this set, and every tap's gonna have a lot of value based on your other cards, it's gonna be a pretty good combo for the deck. Rhyme for a Reindeer, same idea. Not really going to be an important card for other decks, but pretty good in the blue-white deck. Plunge into Winter, same idea. This is a spell where it's fine, on rate. But if you're drawing a card off your uncommon, or you're getting value off your other tap triggers, it's going to be a lot better, which is kind of cool. And there aren't really any Mystical Archive cards to the blue-white deck. Blue-white deck, it looks a little thin, honestly. The cards are very, very powerful. There aren't that many. There's a lot of payoffs, but not a lot of enablers. But if you get them, they should be very, very good if the deck's open. Our Simic archetype is based around big stuff, just large spells of mana value 5 or greater. So we see a 3 mana for a 1/3 Videlkin Scout, wandered from Ravnica here somehow. Tap to add 2 mana, but only for things that are very expensive, and can also loot. So this is an archetype that wants to play very big things. Again, a little more of a loose archetype. You can't afford to have all of your decks, all of your cards cost 5 more mana. That won't work very well, obviously. It's a little more of a loose archetype here, keyword chunker, if you will. And we see cards like Up the Beanstalk, which is also a good card in bargain decks and everything else. As an enchantment that ETBs draws a card, and they can draw more cards later. Howling Galefang should be good here, because I imagine adventure cards would be pretty good in this archetype. This is the way to do things early and late. So you have a 4/4, kind of holds the ground, plays defense, which is nice, and buys you time to get into your late game. Beanstalk Worm, 5/4 reach for 5 is obviously okay. The ramp effect here is not great, as you can't draw a card like Explore. But if you're going big, this is fine. The adventure bar is basically free. You just have free mana on turn 2, do your adventure, get a 4th land, yada, 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 for turn 3. But yeah, looks like a solid archetype card for the deck. Balloonist Gatekeeper, another great one here for the deck, I think. This is a 6 mana, 6/4, but 2 mana adventure to bounce a creature. This is a good one as far as buying time. This blue-green deck said I want to buy time in the early game, and then get up to the larger mana cost, start playing some big, huge things over and over again, getting value out of them, which is good. Transmuters be very, very important in this deck. No real synergy with the expensive stuff, but blue-green obviously struggles with actually killing or removing creatures. This can curse a creature but make it smaller, which is kind of cool, as well as being a body, which is nice. Then we see Garruk's Uprising from the Mystical Archive sheet as a 3-mana enchantment. ATB draw, Power Raider draw, etc., etc. Kind of cool. Ruby, Gruul. One of the looser archetypes. We've obviously seen this archetype a lot in draft formats, the Power 4 more bonus archetype. And again, similar to the blue-green archetype, a loose archetype is you can't just have all 4 power creatures in your deck. It's not possible, So probably more of a red-green beatdown deck with a little bit of a slant as far as these cards go. Ruby's obviously a great mana creature. It's also going to be a big attacker later, which is kind of cool. We got Picnic Ruiner, which is a 2/2 for 2 that is double strike if you have creatures power 4 or greater. Puts counters everywhere, which is kind of cool. Also, because you can grow your things too. Curse the Werefox would be important here as a removal spell. Obviously, if all your things are big, you can kill stuff with them. And then Monster Roll over Trample is very important too. Two-Headed Hunter, double strike, big creature, double strike. Just Gruul's not rocket science, folks. Just play big things, have a decent mana curve. Witch Stalker, a very cool card. One of the few archetype cards where it's a card that's gonna play on curve in the archetype. To the defender early in the game. Then once you have your big things online, it's a 3/3, which is pretty good also. So nice early card for the deck. Minecart Devil, 4 power, 3 mana. A little bit of pump spell here, which is kind of cool as well. Grabby Giant, same idea. Play a 4 power creature, has some utility also. So again, more of a loose archetype. Nothing too crazy in Gruul. Mostly your kind of big good stuff. Get some good removal spells. Maybe get a bomb or two and so on and so forth. And that is it. That is all 10 of your archetypes for Bronze Mythic for Wilds of Eldraine draft. And it'll be interesting to see how they all play together. There's a lot of crossover, which is very, very cool. It's very, very important to find kind of the cross synergies as far as leaving yourself open in a draft. So if you're going to splash a color, where do you want to be? How can you kind of blend archetypes? If I have a fairy deck with some sacrifice elements in it, can I use some of the black bargaining cards that seem like they're more Orzhov fit in my fairy deck, etc., etc. Should be really, really cool. Should be a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to it. You should be too. So once again, Bronze Mythic starts on stream tomorrow night on Tuesday. YouTube on Wednesday. Should be a lot of fun. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you thought of this, all right? This is a new thing I'm trying out here doing the archetype breakdown. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe. Let's rock and roll.